I thought that was hilarious. Anyhow, so today we're going to talk about John the Baptist, specifically about the kind of birth story, not the later ministry. But before we get going, I want you to think and imagine that you are Ewan McGregor. Ewan McGregor is the actor who played young Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequel trilogy. So Ewan McGregor, he's like 10 or 11 in 1979 when the first Star Wars comes out. And he has an uncle Dennis Lawson, who's also an actor. And he's in this weird movie, something space, something, and they go see the movies. And Dennis Lawson's playing Wedge Antilles, the only other pilot beside Luke and Han to survive the first Death Star run. The guy in the Battle of Hoth who does the rope around the giant walker and crashes the thing, that's Wedge, that's Uncle Dennis. The only guy beside Lando to survive the second Death Star run, that's Uncle Dennis. So you're sitting there, you're going to a theater, and it's like, art movie, Uncle Dennis, again. And then you get Star Wars. I mean, mind blown. Right now, this story about John the Baptist, all of us are supposed to be Ewan McGregor, sitting there thinking, art movie, Uncle Dennis, not knowing we're going to get Star Wars and his whole career as an actor, and finally getting to be in Star Wars, and maybe the best thing in the prequel trilogy, honestly, because he was pretty good. We're supposed to be getting just really, really excited at the drama and just what's going to go on in the story that's all baked into the story of John the Baptist's birth. Because there is a lot of drama. There's these mysterious goings-on in the temple, and there's angels just dropping in out of nowhere and delivering these pronouncements, and you're in this really weird spot where you have like this dictator tyrant Herod in charge, but you're in the people of Israel, and surely the Messiah is going to come any moment now. And it's just this huge drama moment, and we were supposed to be getting into that with this story, and that's what we're going to do. So let's talk through what actually happened. Before I forget, and breaking my momentum, these are super busy slides. I apologize. It looked great on a monitor, but not on a screen. So what happened? So what's going on in the story right now is we're at the very end of what's called the intertestamental period, which is the period between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that was about 400-ish years when not a lot went on biblically, not a lot went on for the Jews. A lot of history stuff went on. We'll get back to that in a minute. And there's an old priest. He's like an old country priest named Zechariah. He's married to Elizabeth. She's also from the tribe of Aaron, by the way, which is a blessing for them. A priest can marry any godly woman who's a Jew, but if you marry someone also from the tribe of Aaron, that's good. And they're righteous people. They're good people. They follow God's will. But they don't have any children, which is kind of seen as, what are you guys doing that you don't have kids? Surely there's some sin, there's some issue here. So there's this tension in their relationship. There's tension in their life. But it's his turn to serve in the temple as part of his division. There were 24 divisions of the priests. They took turns serving the temple. It's Abijah's division's turn. He's an Abijah. But serving actually in the temple and doing the sacrifices and the big things, well, there's a lot of priests and not very many chances to do that. They have a lottery. And giving the offering of incense, if you're lucky, you'll win it once in your entire life. And so this is kind of the biggest day in Zechariah's life. I'm not going to have kids, but he gets to go and give the offering of incense. He gets to be the guy doing this. And he goes in. And what's supposed to happen is a bunch of priests, including Zechariah, go into the temple, go into the holy place, not the most holy, just the middle holy, not the outer courts. And the rest of the priests leave. And Zechariah gives the offering. And there's this long silence while everybody prays. And then he's supposed to come out and offer a benediction to the people. And that is not what happened, because out of nowhere, literally, no one's expecting this, boom, an angel appears, the angel Gabriel. And he says, congratulations, good news, the thing you were just praying about, probably wasn't for a child, though that's kind of the context, probably more like for the redemption of Israel, maybe for the Messiah directly. But what you were just praying about is about to happen. And you're going to have a son, and you're going to name him John. And he's going to be, and this is the quote, he will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. That's pretty good. Get a kid, he'll be great in the sight of the Lord, he'll be an evangelist, Billy Graham, okay, good deal. Gabriel goes on. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Okay, that's scary because Elijah is scary. Elijah's entire life is basically called by God, preach God's word, someone tries to kill me. And this is a lot longer than the other stuff. He spent a good chunk of his ministry literally on the run, hiding out in another country. And think about like what Elijah does. Elijah is the guy who said, there's 250 priests of Baal, 250 priests of Asherah, and one me. Let's have a stare down. We're going to go up on a mountain, and if your gods can take care of a sacrifice, great, but if my God can, that's good. And as you remember, these guys come out there. 500 priests, they lay out the sacrifice on the altar to Baal and Asherah, and they're dancing around, and they've got knives and swords, and they're cutting themselves. And Elijah is not sitting there winning. He's sitting there causing trouble. Maybe God's asleep. Did you get Baal his coffee this morning? Maybe he's like using the bathroom. Wait 5 minutes. He'll come back, surely, right? That's Elijah. And that's Gabriel telling Zechariah, your son's going to be Elijah 2.0. And as a parent, that's kind of scary because you don't want to hear your child's going to be a troublemaker and under threat of death at all times. And oh, by the way, Ahab and Jezebel kind of are bywords for terrible kings and queens. Those were Elijah's kings and queens. Herod's not a great person either, so it's very possible Herod's going to kill Elijah 2.0. So it's just really scary for Zechariah to think about this. All these hopes and dreams wrapped up, this giant moment, and then you hear Elijah. It's like, okay. And so we get this great exchange because Zechariah just can't quite believe it. Oh. Next slide, sorry. He asks for a sign. He says, Zechariah asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years. She's past childbearing age. And the angel said to Zechariah, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. Zechariah says, but I'm an old man. How is this going to happen? And then Gabriel says, I'm Gabriel, which literally means I'm a powerful man of God. Old man, powerful man of God. One of these is going to win. And he literally basically says, and I just came straight from God himself to tell you what God said is going to happen, which is really kind of he's just gobsmacked. Zechariah doesn't believe. You have an angel in the temple. You were just praying this thing silently, and I'm going to answer it. What more do you need? Right? I mean, what kind of sign is going to be acceptable to after? Do we go bigger? What is bigger from an angel in the temple? And so there's this moment of just like, why? Why? But Zechariah's going to get a sign. He's going to get a sign, which is he's going to be struck dumb, maybe dumb and mute, until this baby's born. So congratulations, you do get your sign. You get the sign for the person who disbelieves. But remember, Zechariah is supposed to come out and offer a benediction to the people. He's supposed to come out and be like, do a little blessing. And he can't. He can't speak. And so and the people outside are sitting there going, he's been in there a while. He's been in there a while. And this is the part where normally you tell the story about when the priests go into the temple, they tie a rope in case they get struck dead, and they haul the body out with the rope. That's what they're starting to think. I mean, is it rope time? I don't know. I mean, the guy's been there a long time, and he's really old. So he comes out, and he's like, he doesn't know what to do. And this is at the temple in Jerusalem, in the city. Everyone sees it. It's incredibly public. It's obvious something, after a long, long time, something miraculous had happened. He must have seen a vision of some sort. So he goes home. Zechariah goes home, goes back to the hill country where he's from. And Andrew's going to preach on this next week. I don't want to jump into that too much. But when he gets there, see kind of how well Mary takes the exact same message from the exact same angel, as opposed to Zechariah's like, Mary just says, okay, I don't see how it's going to work, but let's go for it. And we start seeing this thing that God does in these testament, these covenant moments with like the patriarchs of, you think, because that's a patriarchal society, the men will handle it well and the women will have vapors and have issues. No, the guy's the one who just completely lost it, and the ladies are the ones who deal with this well. We see God upending the social order like he likes to do in these big moments. So then John's born. It takes 9 months as normal. And the text says that there was a mercy there, which I think means that Elizabeth was not just postmenopausal, but was in fact really old. And she had a very easy birth, because otherwise that would have not gone well at all. But in any event, John's born. And this whole time, Zechariah cannot speak. The whole time, Zechariah cannot speak. And all the friends come in and say, oh, let's name him Zechariah. New baby Zechariah. And Elizabeth just emphatically refuses. No, his name is John. And the friends, in just the biggest jerk move thus far in the New Testament, there will be more later, say, just blow her off. No. Let's ask Zechariah. Zechariah, baby name after, they're like gesturing to him. The guy's not deaf, he just can't speak. But they're, what do we name him? And he grabs basically it's a pad of paper, old style. It's a wax and a stylus. Grabs a pad of paper and says, his name is John, or he's named John. Now, that's how it's written in the Bibles we've got. In the Greek, it's more like, John is his name, morons. It's very, very emphatic. John. That's the name. None of this other business. Which, by the way, is a little weird. This is a time period in which fewer than 10% of the entire population can read and write. So the fact that we have multiple people in this back country who can read and write this quickly and easily is a little weird. But moving on. Where was I going with this? Right. Zechariah says he is named John. John is his name. Not Zechariah, John. And he can talk. He can finally talk again. After he's had this big, decisive, public following of God's command, instead of the doubt he showed earlier, then the punishment's lifted. Then he can miraculously speak again. And he can speak. If you don't use things in your body for 9 months, they don't work very well. He should have been like, no, he can just speak normally. So it's this really, again, very public, very open, very big miracle happening. And all the neighbors notice. They're awestruck, and they save up this information, just like Mary saves up things in her heart when they happen to Jesus. And then Zechariah has this long song, this inspired prophecy. So that's what happens. And it's this really, really interesting story. And we want to go through the pieces of it and how they work. So first, this is a picture from the movie King of Kings, narrated by Orson Welles. The only one I couldn't find that wasn't free for use, copyright. So right now is a moment, talking about the intertestamental period, that there's a lot of space for doubt if you're a first century Jew. You don't even know it's first century BC technically at this point, by about 2 years. It's been about 400 years. The biggest miracle you've gotten was Hanukkah, which was maybe the oil, maybe, nothing big, no Elijahs, no Moses, no Isaiah, no judges, nothing huge, just kind of one miracle, no prophets. And you don't even have a real king, you've got Herod. Herod, historically, is fascinating as a person, where he is a client of Mark Antony, Mark Antony just is the Cleopatra Antony, Julius Caesar's right-hand man, fought a civil war against Octavian and lost, and Octavian became Caesar Augustus. So when Cleopatra did the snakes and died, that was after Antony died. And he's half Jewish, he's half Idumean, or an Edomite. So he's not even really Jewish. And but he is the king of Judea. He's personally able to pick the right side enough to survive. He's got a secret police, one of the first police states we know about. He's a fascinating character, but he's a horrible king. Would you want to live in that place where the guy really doesn't belong to you and he's got secret police? Oh, yeah, and a chain of fortresses from Jerusalem to Egypt in case he had to run. It's like the Herodian, all these other fortresses are literally, I'm going to run there day one, and then there day two, and I'll get to Egypt and survive when the revolution happens. That's all Herod. He's a terrible king. He's a tyrant to live under. But he's also buying popularity. The beautiful renovation of the temple that took decades. That was Herod buying votes, basically, buying popularity. And it just feels kind of icky to live as a subject of Herod. And Israel, or in this case now called Judea, Roman province now, has lost over and over again. Alexander the Great comes through in 329 BC, give or take. After Alexander dies, the Seleucid Empire and the Egyptian Empire under Ptolemies, those guys fight over Israel for literally centuries. At one point, there's an internal feud between two branches of the Hasmoneans, who are Jewish kings, and then Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great, comes in and he conquers Judea on behalf of one of them. And now Judea is a client state of Rome. And Herod's only king because Rome says it's okay. And at this point, by the way, when Pompey Magnus comes in, and the reason I picked this picture was he's interested. They have this interesting temple. Nobody can look inside the temple, not if you're not a priest. But I'm Pompey Magnus. So he walks in. He walks into the holy place. He walks into the most holy place that only the chief priest once a year is allowed to walk into, or you'll be struck dead. Dude survives longer, becomes part of the triumvirate, eventually gets killed in the civil war of Julius Caesar. Years later. God didn't even strike down this Roman who violated the temple. It's rough. And through all of this, ever since Alexander, Greek culture is creeping into Jewish life. The Jews are what we would consider, because we have that morality, moral, monogamy, marry one person, not sexually licentious, focused on God, focused on the one God. They're not Greeks. Greeks with their free love and their exercising in the nude and their giant weird pantheon of extreme weirdo gods, which they totally are. And more Greekism, Greek culture is creeping into Jewish life. There's only really been one kind of win the whole time, and that was the Maccabees, or also called the Hasmoneans, kind of, sort of. And Judah Maccabee was a priest, was the tribe of Aaron, and the Greeks kind of went a step too far, and they sacrificed a bull, I believe a bull, to Zeus in the temple. And Judah Maccabee, Judah the Hammer, Maccabee means the hammer, awesome name, does a revolution, and they kick the Greeks out. That's when Hanukkah happens, by the way, and the first one. And then they do have this kingdom for about 50 years. And then Pompey Magnus comes in. It's like a 50-year win, caused by something any good Jew would have risen up over. So it's not even a good win. It's very, very meh, very, very room for doubt. But then God starts doing this thing with this message about John. And I want you to see all the callbacks to the Old Testament, all the callbacks to these great moments in Scripture. Abraham and Sarah. Zechariah, you're going to have a baby. Abraham, you're going to have a baby. And then disbelief. Sarah laughed. Zechariah asked the question. And then Samson prayed for a baby. And when the baby comes, he's going to be a Nazirite for life. And John is going to refrain from strong drink and almost Nazirite. And I think that the hair thing, because the hair is specifically not mentioned, is because it's a little bit too Greek. It's going to be, people are going to be like, long hair, Greek. So he doesn't do that, so it's not an issue. But again, we're doing this kind of Samson, Nazarite for life, power as long as you are faithful thing. Or Elijah. Supposedly talk about Elijah, power. Elijah is the greatest of the prophets. And prophecy. And this one's a little bit of a stretch, but it spoke to me, so I'm going to include it. Isaiah. When you get to Isaiah 6, he talks about his commissioning. He's in the temple, and he sees this vision of angels. He says, oh, who am I? A man of unclean lips, a people of unclean lips. And an angel grabs a coal from the altar and touches his mouth to purify him. And we're at the, Zechariah's not doing the bread. He's not doing the sacrifice. He's doing the incense, a burning thing. And so I think there's supposed to be a little bit of a commissioning here. But that one might be a stretch. We also have Aaron and Moses. Because remember, at this point, Mary's not pregnant. Jesus is the younger family member. And traditionally, the older, John, should be the one who takes precedence. But we're going to have that same upending. The same thing that we got with Jacob and Esau. Or with, I totally forgot, Joseph and his brothers. All these different times there's a pair. One should be in charge and one shouldn't, and we just flip that over. Manasseh and Ephraim. That happens a bunch. And then finally we have kind of this David callback. And this is the thing that I like the best. Remember, Judah Maccabee, Judah the Hammer, the last big revolutionary against the Greeks, and Romans are kind of Greeks, that's close enough. He was a big leader. He was a man of God. He was the son of a priest. Zechariah is a priest. He's going to be a lot of charisma. John's going to have a lot of charisma. John looks like Judah Maccabee, just better. But he's not the Messiah. It's going to be this other guy that we haven't even seen yet in the story. But again, look at all the callbacks. We start seeing all these great moments in the Old Testament starting to get referenced again for the New Testament, for the New Covenant. So what does that mean? And this is also going to be our three applications. The first one is a line that I'm stealing from a musical. It's always darkest just before they turn on the light. A lot of times it's always darkest for dawn, but this is very intentional. God's turning the light on, so we're going to say it this way. It's really hard for the Jews at this moment in history. Everything looked bleak. They are a conquered people. They are losing their culture. God hasn't talked to them in centuries. And it would be natural to think that God had just abandoned them. They had finally sinned enough. They had gotten on God's last nerve, and he was done with them. Because remember, God threatens that more than a few times. Moses, I'm sick of these people. Kill them all. I'll make a new set to fulfill my promise. And Moses has to run out and beg so God doesn't kill all the people off. And they got to be looking at that scripture going, did we finally do it? Did we finally just lose the status as the chosen people by being complete jerks? I don't know, maybe. Nothing good has happened. But what's actually going on is that God was just waiting until the perfect time to bring his perfect deliverance. And I've talked about this before. It's one of my pet things when I'm up here is all the pieces that had to come into place to make the early church work. The Roman Empire and the road system and this Pax Romana, where you could send people all over the world quickly and efficiently to spread the good news. Well, you need the Roman Empire for that. You need that road system. You need their military supremacy that lasts really kind of Octavian till about 300-ish, and then things start getting a little squirrely. Just in that period of the early church, no more, no less. Or things like Alexander the Great, and the fact that throughout the entire Roman Empire, there was the lingua franca, the language that everybody spoke, was Greek, was coined in Greek. Well, Judea, conquered by Alexander, they spoke Greek. Common language to easily spread the word. All these things, it wasn't that God had abandoned them, it's that God was lining up all the pieces just perfectly so that when he decided it was time to move, everything worked just perfectly. And I think a lot of this is baked into, look at all the different contrasts in this story. We've got Zechariah and Elizabeth, country people, godly people, not powerful, not important. Herod, he's the king, but he's a horrible human being. He's not righteous. He's not godly. He has all the power in the world, and he's not John's dad. It's Zechariah. Or you get John himself and Herod, a lifetime devotion of God versus lifetime devotion to power. Or Elijah-ness, godliness, reliance on God. Ahab-ness, self-reliance, self-made, but completely empty. Or Zechariah and Gabriel. I'm an old man. I'm God's man. Which one are you going to trust? And then finally, Zechariah and Mary and how they receive the word of the angels. The one angel talks to them both. Where you just start seeing these different contrasts. You start seeing that God hasn't forgotten you. He's just lining everything up. And if things look bad, it's because there's a contrast, not because the bad guys are winning. That's our first application. The second one is, exactly how much proof do you need before you're going to believe God? And I'm going to be honest, I've had this conversation now with at least one of my children, I will not name them, of people are smart. Some people are very smart. And so we can convince ourselves of stupid things very easily because we're so smart we can logic ourselves into it. And we see that with Zechariah. The angel Gabriel, remember, every time an angel shows up in the Bible, the first thing they say is, don't be afraid. So a terrifying angel of God appears in the temple and gives you a direct good news, literally directly God, Gabriel, Zechariah, nobody else involved. And the very first thing out of his mouth is, now wait a minute, is that actually going to happen? Because I'm really old, and my wife's really old. And it's just one of those, what do you need? Why can't you just listen to the angel who came straight from God into the temple to give you your good news? It's just so easy for us to find the why nots than it is just to trust God. And so we get this, Zechariah initially, and then Elizabeth and Mary, who both are like, okay, I hear it, let's go. Whatever's going on, let's go. And we just see Zechariah come around. I don't want to completely pound on him the whole time. But more importantly, are there things that you know that are getting in the way of what God's trying to tell you? I mean, we know that all things are possible with God. But Zechariah knew that they were a conquered people. Herod was this half-Edomite king who would very gladly kill a prophet standing up to him. And he knew that he and Elizabeth were too old. But in the process, he was just going, but, and just kind of butt away God, instead of receiving the blessing that was trying to be given to him. I think that's the reason we get so many of these callbacks. The reason that God is saying, okay, I am explicitly making you think about Abraham. I'm explicitly making you think about Samson. I'm explicitly making you think about all these other things, King David, is so that, yeah, I know, I'm doing it anyways. Yep, not possible physically, I understand, doing it anyways, because I'm God and I can. That's the benefits of omnipotence. And so we don't have an excuse left. We can't say, okay, this doesn't make a lot of sense, it's kind of weird, I'm not sure if No. God is saying, I am doing this thing, this enormous thing. And so he's giving us all the proof we could possibly need. And that leads us to our last application point, the one that I think is good. And that's God is saying to get excited. God can be subtle. We know God can be subtle. We'll come to this in a few weeks, but how he talks to Mary, very much in the low key. Joseph, very, very low key. They sneak away to Egypt. God can be subtle. God is not being subtle in this story at all. He dropped a miracle into the temple, the center of the Jewish world, during a service. Can you imagine the Pope is doing the Christmas Mass in a few weeks, and all of a sudden an angel just pops in and starts talking? That's what God just did. And it's this persistent, at least 9 months. That assumes that he went home, they got pregnant that night, probably more like a year. But at least 9-month ongoing, everybody could notice it miracle that Zechariah couldn't speak and then he could. So do you want to see? It doesn't take more than a month to get from Jerusalem to Judea and back. Trust me. It's like walking distance half the time. And then the name. And the second, the absolute moment that they pick the preferred name and name the child, a second miracle. Zechariah can speak again. So again, very public. Everybody around heard about it and was amazed and knew about it. And God, again, with the callbacks and how he's starting this whole thing, God is saying, I'm doing something big. All the big moments, all the highlight reel of the Old Testament, we're bringing all that in. We're starting up something really, really big. I'm bringing out version 2.0 of Mr. Unsettled himself, the prophet Elijah, to make sure you understand this is huge. And that's because it's the Messiah. This is the biggest thing to ever happen in the history of time and space and creation. God himself coming down to earth and becoming just like us, weird, talky, smelly apes. Not God, but tiny, itty-bitty, little. But that's enormous. And so we should be excited. We should be looking at this going, oh, I'm in the theater, I'm in McGregor, I'm about to get Star Wars. This is so exciting. Oh, there's the crawl. Oh, there's a Star Destroyer. Yes, we should be being so excited because the Messiah is almost here. The wait is almost over. Everything that went wrong in Genesis, sin, and the Garden of Eden, and all the suffering and pain, everything since then, it's about to get fixed in just a couple of short years from this moment. That's a huge deal. And so God's like, let's be big. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it's coming in. It's going to be exciting. And for me, that's the biggest thing for us, is Christmas is about Jesus being born. That's good. Christmas is about the Messiah is coming. And that should be super exciting for absolutely every one of us here. And that's the thing to remember from the beginning of the story of John the Baptist. So go ahead and pray, and then, Lord God, thank you for the chance to come up here to talk about your plan, to talk about the things that you've done for us, especially sending your son to be just like us, which was a definite step down, and to the years of ministry and crucifixion, resurrection, but especially just coming to be with us and that you hadn't given up on us, even when it feels like sometimes you have. God, we ask that you continue to bless us, help us to show you to everyone around us in this season, help them focus on you. And if you join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into